Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. Following my duties in this House this afternoon, I shall have an audience of Her Majesty the Queen. I shall then continue with my duties in this House from the backbenches, where I will continue to be the Member of Parliament for Maidenhead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I profoundly disagree with many of the decisions the Prime Minister has made and many of the things she says. But I recognise that she does have a respect for public service and for the future of our country. So how does she feel about handing over to a man who, among many things, is happy to demonise Muslims, is prepared to chuck our loyal public servants and diplomats under a bus, and promises to sell our country out to Donald Trump and his friends?
I am pleased to hand over to an incoming leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister, who I worked with when he was in my cabinet, who who is committed as a Conservative who stood on a Conservative manifesto in 2017 to delivering on the vote of the British people in 2016 and to delivering a bright future for this country.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to not only thank my right honourable friend for her loyal service as Prime Minister over the last 3 years, but also for her 33 years in public service, which is a record to be proud of, but also to thank her for her personal support in helping me get my private member's bill, the Homelessness Reduction Act, onto the statute book. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it is far better to help people and prevent people from becoming homeless, to use the taxation system to combat obesity and to prevent people from smoking in the first place? Does she agree with me that prevention is far better than a cure?
First of all, can I say to my honourable friend, can I thank him for all the work that he did on his Homelessness Reduction Act? Can I also say, crucially, we are actually seeing that Act having an impact, and that is so important for people who are benefiting from the work that he did. He's been doing a lot of work, I know, as part of the Smoking and Health APPG, and I agree that we do need to start viewing health as an asset to protect throughout our lives. That's why we've taken bold action on smoking and on childhood obesity, and I'm proud that we've delivered the biggest ever cash boost in the history of the National Health Service, but also a long-term plan that, as my honourable friend says, will focus on prevention. Prevention also focusing on cancer care and mental health, but making sure that we are trying to ensure that people do not get into the situation where they are in that ill health in the first place. Preventing smoking, preventing obesity are key parts for better lives for people in the future.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks the final day in office for the Prime Minister, and I pay tribute to her sense of public duty. Public service should always be recognised. Being an MP, a minister, or indeed a Prime Minister is an honour that brings with it huge responsibility and huge pressures, both personally and, I'm sure, the Prime Minister and probably the whole House would agree, on those very closest to us, who often are not able to answer back for the criticisms made against them. So I hope, Mr. Speaker, that she has a marginally more relaxing time on the back benches, and perhaps, like the Chancellor, even helping me to oppose the reckless plans of her successor. Mr. Speaker, if I may continue, I'm glad the government party's in such good heart today, Mr. Speaker. For tomorrow they won't be. Mr. Speaker, in the last 3 years, child poverty has gone up. Pensioner poverty has gone up. In-work poverty has gone up. Violent crime has gone up. NHS waiting times have gone up. School class sizes have gone up. Homelessness has gone up. Food bank use has gone up. Does the Prime Minister have any regrets about any of those things I've just said?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, it's very good to see the Conservative Party in good heart, which is more than I can say for the Labour Party. But let me just tell the right honourable gentleman, let me just say something to the right honourable gentleman about my record over the last 3 years and how I measure my record over the last 3 years. It's in the opportunity for every child who is now in a better school. It's in the comfort for every person who now has a job for the first time in their life. It's in the hope of every disadvantaged young person now able to go to university. And it's in the joy of every couple who can now move into their own home. Because at its heart, politics isn't about exchanges across these dispatch boxes, nor about eloquent speeches or media headlines. Politics is about the difference we make every day to the lives of people up and down this country. They are our reason for being here, and we should never forget it.
Mr. Speaker, politics is about real life. Politics is about what people suffer in their ordinary lives. And I didn't mention that per pupil school funding has gone down. Police numbers are down. GP numbers are falling. In the 2017 Conservative manifesto, the Prime Minister promised that no school would have its budget cut, and that they would protect TV licences for the over 75s and halve rough sleeping. Which of these pledges is the Prime Minister most sorry has not been achieved?
Can I just point out to the right honourable gentleman, I'm pleased to hear that he spent some time reading the Conservative Party manifesto in 2017. Had he read it properly, he's not been known always for reading the documents that he stands up and talks about. Had he read it properly, he'd have said we did make a pledge on rough sleeping to halve rough sleeping by 2022 and to stop rough sleeping by 2027. I'm pleased to say that in the last year we have seen rough sleeping going down, and particularly rough sleeping going down in those areas where this government has been taking action.
Jeremy Corbyn.
I don't quite know where the Prime Minister gets her figures from on rough sleeping. All I know is that I travel around this country just like other members of this House, and I talk to people who've had a disaster in their lives and end up rough sleeping. We are the 5th richest country in the world. It is surely wrong that anyone should end up sleeping on the streets of this country. We can and should do something about it. Mr. Speaker, I've often disagreed with the Prime Minister and have many criticisms of her policies. However, I welcomed the reduction in the stake on fixed odds betting terminals, the adoption of the Children's Funeral Fund and scrapping employment tribunal fees. Which of these policies is the Prime Minister most proud of?
What can I say to the right honourable gentleman? I'm proud of all the policies that we have introduced that have been improving people's lives. I'm proud of the fact that through the balanced management of the economy that we have done, we now see more people in work in this country than ever before. I'm proud of the fact there are more children in good and outstanding schools. I'm proud of the fact that the attainment gap between the disadvantaged and the advantaged has been narrowed under this government. And I'm proud of the fact that we are putting the biggest cash boost in its history into our National Health Service. We are ensuring that the National Health Service, the most beloved institution in this country, will be there for people into the future. This is a Conservative government, my government, delivering on the things that matter to people in their day-to-day lives.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister may have noticed that none of those things that I mentioned were actually in the Conservative Party manifesto in 2017, but every one of them was a Labour pledge in 2017. On Brexit, the Prime Minister's own red lines ruled out any sensible compromise deal. Only after she had missed her own deadline to leave did the Prime Minister even begin to shift her position. But by then, she no longer had the authority to deliver. Her successor has no mandate at all. Does she have confidence that the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge will succeed where she has not?
Can I just say to the right honourable gentleman, I worked tirelessly to get a good deal for the UK, and I also worked hard to get that deal through this Parliament. I voted for the deal. What did the right honourable gentleman do? He voted against a deal, he voted to make no deal more likely, and when there was a prospect of reaching consensus across this House, the right honourable gentleman walked away from the talks. At every stage, his only interest has been playing party politics. And frankly, he should be ashamed of himself.
We've had 3 years of bungled negotiations, and we now have the spectacle of a Prime Minister coming into office with no electoral mandate, looking for a Brexit deal that has been ruled out by the European Union, or in the case of a no deal, ruled out by the majority in this House and by anyone that understands the dangers to the British economy of a no deal. The next Prime Minister thought the Isle of Man was in the European Union and that the European Union made rules about kippers that in fact were made by the government that he was part of. He also said the UK could secure tariff-free trade through Article 24 of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, despite the Trade Secretary, Attorney General, Governor of the Bank of England, all confirming that is not possible. At the start of 2018, it's coming, don't worry. At the start of 2018, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister herself set up a new unit to counter fake news, charged with combating disinformation. How successful does she think that's been?
I have to say to the right honourable gentleman that I fear that our success hasn't been what we wanted it to be, from the amount of fake news and fake information he uses at that dispatch box.
Maybe, Mr. Speaker, she can have a word with her successor on the way out. But let me conclude by welcoming some for today. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by welcoming some of the Prime Minister's notable U-turns over the last couple of years. The cruel dementia tax was scrapped. Plans to bring back grammar schools were ditched. The threat to the pensions triple lock was abandoned. Withdrawal of the winter fuel payments was dumped. The pledge to bring back fox hunting was dropped. And they binned their plan to end universal free school meals for 5 to 7-year-olds. The Prime Minister has dumped her own manifesto. Given that her successor has no mandate from the people, no mandate in which to move into office, doesn't she agree the best thing the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge could do later on today, when he takes office, is to call a general election and let the people decide their future?
To the right honourable gentleman is no. And if he wants to talk about people ducking manifesto commitments and commitments made during a general election campaign, can we remember what the Labour Party, the right honourable gentleman, said about student debt? Going to abolish student debt? After the election, no, he rose back on that promise, What did he say during the general election? He was committed to Trident. What does he say after the general election? No, he's not committed to Trident at all. He has broken promise after promise to the people of this country. But I say to the right honourable gentleman, as this is the last time that we will have this exchange across these dispatch boxes, to say that it is the strength of our British democracy that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition have these exchanges across their dispatch boxes every week at 2 swords' length. No quarter is sought and none is given. And that's as it should be in our adversarial parliamentary democracy. But he and I are very different people and with very different politicians. I think we approach the issues we face in this country in different ways. I have spent all but one of my years in this House on the front bench trying to implement the policies I believe in. He has spent most of his time on the back benches campaigning for what he believes in, often against his own party. But what I think we both have in common is a commitment to our constituencies. I saw that after the terrorist attack in Finsbury Park Mosque in his constituency. But perhaps I could just finish my exchange with him by saying this. As a party leader who has accepted when her time was up, perhaps the time is now for him to do the same.